So for someone who's just listening to this podcast, who's maybe heard about Bitcoin, but they haven't really thought about it and been exposed to it properly, can you give them the 101 on what the Bitcoin value proposition is in your eyes?
Totally, yeah. I actually think the best place to start is understanding money a bit better. I like to think of money as our time and our energy in an abstracted form. What I mean by that is you do this podcast, in exchange for that, you get money. I run Strike, in exchange for that, you get money. You mow a lawn, you fix a windshield, you drive a car for someone else, you get money. So money is the market good that captures our collective contributions to society. It's intended to capture our time and energy so that that time and energy can either be saved or be traded, right? You can't go to the restaurant after this podcast and say, hey guys, I just recorded a podcast, I'll take 2 steaks. They'll be like, what? I don't want that. That's what we call barter, right? To solve for barter and scale the economy and allow us to hyper specialize on something like a podcast. Like a podcast isn't a tradable market good for dinner, for gas, for groceries, but it is for money. And so money is that market good, again, for abstracted time and energy. Now, if I were to store my time and energy in wheat, for example, let's go through that mental exercise. So I work all day on whatever I'm doing, and in return I get wheat. Well, how good is that money, as wheat being the money, at persisting and saving through time? Well, it's very bad, because it's going to go bad and moldy and stale. And so that wheat is going to be worth 0 in about a week, right? Everyone has moldy bread. And then how good is that money in exchange? Can I send that wheat to Europe on my phone, right? And so thinking of money as how to capture your time and energy is a very powerful idea, as opposed to like a piece of paper, or as opposed to something that your government, whatever, tells you to use. Then contrast it to the dollar. If a government can print their own money and debase their money, that means they're debasing by proxy your time and energy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So also a government's ability to borrow their own money is, in my opinion, as close to time travel as we've ever seen, because you're borrowing the time and energy from the collective populace from the future. That's crazy. You're taking time and energy from the future and saying, we'll pay it back at some point. That's as close to time travel and as malicious of an act. But every time the U.S. government prints a dollar, they're devaluing me in my life, because I've spent time and energy here on this planet. In return for that, I've got U.S. dollars, and now those U.S. dollars are worth less, so I'm worth less.
Yes.
And so the idea that you have a money that's fixed, can't be debased. So the holder, the time and energy of those that hold it cannot be debased, and then that lives outside the purview of a government or a central party or a corporation or any individual, is the most powerful concept when it comes to storing our time and energy. And you'd have to think through the history of money. Well, historically, you try and get as close as you can, right? Bitcoin right now, I believe, is as close as we can to the perfect store for our collective time and energy. But once upon a time, it was gold.
Yes.
Why? Because those collection of chemicals get us kind of close. It's harder to find more gold and debase our time and energy than it is silver, than it is copper, right? And people think of real estate as a place to store wealth, store time and energy. Why? Because you can't print any more land. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean you can't print any more real estate, right? They're going to build a building that's 1,000 stories high in Manhattan one day. So we've tried to find vehicles that are close enough at the time and energy piece. And Bitcoin, my interpretation of Satoshi and Bitcoin is the tool that's best equipped to be money, which is the tool that's best equipped to store your time and energy and allow you to save it and exchange it for something in the market. So, that advancement is so powerful. Here's the last, sorry, I know I'm ranting at this point, but I love this. I think the last thing I'll say, and this may get a little weird or dark, but I like to compare the guarantee and promise of Bitcoin as a fixed money to the guarantee and promise of death, and that we can't live forever. What I mean by that is that the fact that I'm going to die, and I know I'm going to die, is what allows me to value my life. If I knew I could live forever, I'd go to the gym in 10,000 years. I'd think about reproducing in 100,000 years. Why would the point is, how would I ever be able to value today? if there's infinite amounts of dollars, infinite amounts of debt, infinite amounts of printing currency, it doesn't allow me to value the paycheck I'm getting now. And so the promise that I will die is what allows me to value my life. Time as an asset is infinite, but my time isn't. And it's the promise of Bitcoin, the fact that I have a money that is fixed that actually allows me to value my time and energy right now. And so when you hear Bitcoiners say, I got into Bitcoin, I got healthier. I got into Bitcoin, I lowered my time preference. I got into Bitcoin and I thought about the world differently. It's going from a life of infinity, which is impossible to value, to a life that is finite, that requires you to value it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
To me, it's just a life-altering technology and an advancement in money, which is how we capture, exchange, and save time and energy between each other.
Amen. I think that's one of the best explanations of Bitcoin, not from the tech perspective, but from the value perspective that I've ever heard. So I hope that resonates with the people listening, man. No, for real, that's powerful. I think that two points. I think two things are really interesting with that, which is one, money is one of the only technologies I can think of which is worse now, excluding Bitcoin, I'm talking fiat money, is worse now than it was thousands of years ago. The money system, if you were to go back 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, when things were running off gold and off a gold standard, it was better. That was a better technology in terms of all the things that you're talking about than what we have now. And then I think the second point is just that almost everybody who is alive today, vast majority of people, have never known any different. People are just used to the broken money system. When you even say money, people's brains go to a dollar bill or, euros or pounds or numbers in the bank account or whatever. People don't really think of money as that stored labor and energy, which you can then use to trade for other people's labor and energy in the form of goods and services, which is what it is. If you work a job, if you run a business, if you have a career, we are all constantly exchanging our time and energy for goods and services, right? It's just constant exchange, and we do that through the medium of money because we can't always barter, as you were saying. But I just think that because it's, when did the U.S. go completely off the gold standard? 1971, and I think in the 1930s the process began.
It's around the world wars.
Yeah, in many places, and so this is just what people are used to, right? It's just like, inflation is just a given. Some people think inflation is good, some people say. And you're just like, wait, if you think about it, the idea that you store $10,000 today and then the next year it's worth $9,500, and then later down the line, you can get to a point where, that 10,000 is now worth 500 or 1,000, and people kind of just accept that. And you're just like, no, that's not meant to happen. And historically, that wouldn't have happened, to say, if you'd stored your money in gold. I talked to my father, who came to the UK from Nigeria in the 1970s. The first time. My dad's a medical doctor, a physician. And this is the 70s. We're now in 2024. Head of the household of a family of now 7, but at the time would have been 5 or 6. Medical doctor in the UK. What do you think his annual salary was in the 70s?
Geez, in the 70s?
Yeah.
What was a house?
As a doctor.
Like, a house was like 20 pounds, so 8,000 pounds?
4,000.
4,000? Okay.
Yeah, 4,000 pounds a year.
That
was a good guess. Yeah, that was a good guess. But 4,000 pounds a year as a medical doctor in
crazy,
the UK,
man.
right? And now you're just thinking like, gosh, earning 4,000 pounds a month as a doctor wouldn't be a good salary.
You couldn't pay back your loans.
Yeah. And that's only 50 years ago. It's not that long. He tells me the story of, he and my mom wanted to buy a certain house, which cost like, I think, 15,000 pounds. Not the deposit, the whole house, 15,000 pounds at the time. That would have been maybe $25,000. And, they were like, no, that's out of our budget. We can't afford that. And now, in many places, you can't even get anything under $500,000 in some places, approaching $1 million. So it just shows, when you were talking about them the Fed or the central banks or governments just stealing from people, stealing labor, stealing value from people born and unborn. It's very real. And I think if people truly woke up to that, then there would be some form of real revolution.
Yeah, well, I think they are. Yeah, that's exactly right. So your dad earning £4,000 a year, and I believe a house, would you say it was 15,000 that they were looking at?
Yeah, maybe 10,000 to 20,000, depending on what you wanted.
Right. So that sounds like 2.5 to 3 years worth of work to acquire. What's crazy is if people I encourage everyone listening to go look into metrics like the average year someone gets married, the percentage of the populace that turns into a homeowner. It's all going very bad. So, for example, everyone used to get married around 22, 23. Everyone's now getting married around 32, 33. Life expectancy is going down. Home ownership's going down. Divorce rates going up. And these are all metrics that tell me that in order to live a life what you're pleased with, it's requiring more time and energy. Your dad could have worked 2.5, 3, 4, 5 years to own a home. People are having to work 20, 30, 40, 50 years to own a home. They're still the same humans. Yep. So by debasing the currency, again, if you think of it as time and energy in an abstracted form, you're increasing the time and energy required to live a sustainable life. And it deteriorates society. It's really an awful, malicious thing to do to, when you say steal from people, they are stealing the time and energy from the collective populace. When your groceries double, when your McDonald's order doubles, whatever that is for you, and your gas price doubles, it's just requiring more time and energy for you to have the life that you need to have.
You know what, Jack? I think you have just nailed a much better definition of what inflation truly is and why it's so bad. The standard definition of inflation is either, increase in the money supply, devaluation of currency, or just prices going up. Someone could say that they're often the same thing. But I think when you think of it as debasing the value of the collective's time and effort, then you see just how insidious it is.
Debasing you.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you made up of? The energy you contribute and the time you have.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Like, your life is capped with the time that you're given, and your life is expressed through the energy that you contribute. And they're debasing and devaluing that. So every time they devalue your money, they're devaluing you. And what an awful crime. And so I think we all can feel society deteriorating in many ways. We feel people getting angrier. We feel civil unrest. We feel whatever metric you care about, whether it's health, cancer rates, the real estate market, all going bad. And I think people are looking for a solution, and I hold the personal opinion that the money's broken. Yes. And when I say the money's broken, it's like our ability to store, save, and exchange time and energy is fundamentally broken. And so why do I care about Bitcoin is, listen, people can have their qualms with Bitcoin, and I appreciate that it's not perfect, and that's why I spend my time on it. But I think it's the closest thing we have to fixing that problem. And there's a saying in Bitcoin, fix the money, fix the world. And when you hear it, when you see it, and you're not familiar enough with the concepts, it sounds maybe a little too insane to take seriously. But that's what we mean when we say that, is that if we can fix the ability to store, save, and exchange our time and energy, I think we can fix a lot of the problems with the world.